Hello, everyone. This is Matt Barton, Urban Conservation Specialist with St. Louis Audubon Society, and thanks for tuning into our Bird Safe St. Louis training session for spring 2025. Tonight, the information we discuss will cover a few broad categories. One is risks facing migratory birds, information about Bird Safe project and our past findings, the survey protocol and logging observations in iNaturalist, and the next steps before starting our spring surveys. And I like to start this presentation by showing a picture of City Garden in downtown St. Louis. And for those of you who aren't familiar, this is a green space slash sculpture garden area that is right downtown. It's just west of Keener Plaza, not too far from the Mississippi River. And when you look at the picture, you can probably see why this would be an attractive place for birds. There's a lot of good habitat over there you can see with trees. Um, would be a good place to stop over and rest if you needed to while you were migrating. And there's a lot of native plants and water features in this garden as well. So you have a lot of good resources. And the more you look at this picture, you might notice some little peculiarities about it. One is this almost little flying saucer looking shape up here. And you can also see there's some little dots down here as well. And the reason is that this actually isn't a picture of City Garden, it's a picture of a reflection of City Garden. And I think that this picture does a good job of demonstrating what exactly these birds are up against. At first glance, some of you might not have been able to tell what exactly was wrong with the picture. You might have been able to see that there was something off, but maybe just couldn't put your finger on it. Um, and that's, the real problem is that some of these surfaces are very reflective, and birds don't have that luxury of sitting and deciding, is this a piece of glass? They don't understand that concept, but more in that later. And our bird populations are in crisis. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology scientists published in Science in 2020 that the United States and Canada have lost 30% of our bird population since 1970. And as you can see here in the chart on the left, this is from this year. Most of the broad categories of our birds are in decline. Um, and even in some of those that have experienced some growth, you can see where they've also experienced some recent decline. And some of the drivers for this population crisis include habitat loss. So think about prairies being cut for development, forests being cleared for also, development or timber, changing climate conditions. That kind of goes into habitat loss, that as our uh, climate changes over time and heats up, there's going to be changes where certain birds will no longer have access to the areas that they need or resources in order to continue growing in their populations. There's also cat predation, which is a really big issue for birds. That not only includes feral cats, but also domestic cats that are left to wander and do whatever they will. And then finally, what we'll focus on this evening is collisions. And collisions are a very large problem for birds, and we'll get into that a little bit further in the presentation. So bird migration. Migration is a part of the biology of birds that can inherently put them in danger. Um, if you think about a bird flying a long distance, there's a lot of possible hazards that they might encounter along the way during that migration. And 3 to 5 billion birds migrate through the United States and Canada every year during the spring and the fall. 70% of North American bird species are migratory, and 80% of those birds are migrating at night. And you might wonder, why would a bird migrate at night? Might the benefit be? And there's a few. One is that there are cooler temperatures at night, which just is less stress on the birds as they're undertaking these migrations. There's also the potential then at night to avoid predators, such as hawks and other animals that might seek to prey on them. And birds also use celestial bodies like the stars and the moon to help them navigate along their migratory routes. And here you can see the United States has four major migratory flyways: the Pacific, the Central, the Mississippi, and the Atlantic. And St. Louis sits right there in the middle of the Mississippi Flyway, and it's denoted by the red star. And this area is defined by the critical river systems that are used by the bird, such as the Mississippi and the Missouri. It's a very important flyway also in the sense that 60% of North American songbirds utilize the flyway, 40% of North American waterfowl do as well, and that accounts for over 325 species of bird. And during spring migration, the peak here is generally going to be in the first 2 weeks of May, and birds will be moving north. And that's why we, in collaboration with Lights Out Heartland, we encourage Lights Out in May. And there's the Lights Out campaign that might notice places like the Arch grounds turning out the lights on the arch. And that's all in observation of the Lights Out campaign. In the fall, migration tends to be a little more spread out generally. Birds can start moving in July, and some are still continuing on their routes into November. Um, and during that time, birds are generally moving south. And since the migration period during the fall is a little more spread out, we split the difference, so to speak, and typically, or we observe lights out campaign in September during the fall. And St. Louis is a relatively dangerous city for migrating birds. Most of our birds, like we were discussing, they migrate at night to their wintering or breeding grounds, depending on the time of year. And in this image here, this graphic, you can see that the results of a study from Cornell University scientists. And what they did was they looked at the amount of light pollution, the geography, and they also used radar data to measure migration intensity. And so you can see here in the image, the circles are representing those different radar stations that they were using to collect the data. And the color gradient where you're seeing the more yellow colors, that's indicating a higher level of migration activity. And so based on the information, the scientists calculated a risk factor for birds and as they migrate, and it showed that St. Louis was the fifth most dangerous city for birds migrating in the spring and the sixth most dangerous city while they're migrating through in the fall. And then as far as bird collisions, a lot of people don't realize the scale of the problem. Um, there's an estimated 1 billion birds that are killed annually from building collisions in the United States. 56% of those occur at low-rise buildings, which are 4 stories to 11 stories. 44% are occurring at residencies, which are classified as 1 to 3 stories. And then less than 1% are at high rises, but which are 12 stories or more. But these buildings have a higher bird per building mortality rate, And a lot of times there's, multiple birds hitting these. It tends to draw more media attention and cause a little bit more of a story to develop around it. But with the 44% of collisions happening at residencies, 1 to 3 stories, it just goes to show that all of us have a hand to play when it comes to solving this problem. It's not just a problem for high-rise buildings. And part of the reason that there are so many collisions, in part, is because of light and light pollution. So, like we were discussing earlier, birds are migrating at night and they're using the celestial bodies like the sun and the moon to navigate. So, bright lights and sky glow can confuse birds and cause them to be trapped or fly themselves to exhaustion. Um, the birds are also then drawn to dangerous urban and suburban areas since there's more lighting in those areas generally, so they're going to, draw more birds in. And the light pollution problem is especially dangerous when there is a low cloud ceiling and bad weather. Um, Both of those can cause birds to come further down from their migratory routes, and it can really cause problems. And a good example of that many of you might be familiar with as far as light pollution and the issue it can cause for birds is the 9/11 memorial. So on September 11th every year, the World Trade Center site shines lights into the sky from dawn to dusk, and that's called the Tribute in Light, which you can see there on the left. And if you look closely, you can kind of see some blurred little dots and what kind of almost looks like insects in this picture being drawn to a light. But these are actually birds that are being drawn into these columns of light. And what happens is they get trapped in these columns of light, they start flying, they get exhausted, and they're wasting their energy that they should be using to continue on their migratory route. And migration is a very resource intensive time. So, to help combat this issue that they realized was happening, they now have observers go out when the tribute in light is taking place, and for every time 1,000 birds or more are circling the columns of light, or an exhausted bird is observed to have fallen from to the ground, the lights will be turned off for 20 minutes, which gives the birds a chance to clear the area and continue along their migratory route. And another danger with collisions is simply the glass and the way that we design our buildings. Birds don't see glass as a barrier. They don't identify glass as a barrier. It's unknown to them. And so that can cause problems in a couple of ways. One is reflectivity and reflections in glass. And that's demonstrated by the top picture here on the left. You can see that someone's taken a picture and there's all this foliage reflecting in the glass. And that's all presumably behind the photographer who's taking this picture. A bird might see this and think, oh, there's a nice tree I can go land into. There might be, some sort of other resources that are being reflected in the glass, or even the sky that they think it's just a continuation of the horizon. But in reality, it's a reflection, and that can be very dangerous when they collide with this surface. The other issue with glass is transparency. And in that case, a bird might simply think that there's nothing there, it can fly through it, and then it results in a collision once again. Um, Glass canyons and walkways that connect buildings are also problematic. And you can see one here in this picture on the bottom left. Um, so a bird might try to, it's a small section between buildings that, could be kind of tall. It's just another kind of obstacle that we put in their way. And then this, clear glass in the photo as well, there's a chance a bird might think it could simply go through. And here's a couple of pictures that I took in the fall of 2020 when I was walking around our survey sites. And this shows the Centene buildings in downtown Clayton. And you can really see that it's kind of difficult to tell in some instances where the sky starts and the building ends, um, or what's reflecting off of what. It really is quite a confusing image, especially for a bird. And you can see on the left as well, those two buildings are connected by one of those glass canyons, which is problematic. And so, with all of that in mind about these hazards to birds, that spawned the BirdSafe St. Louis project. And the goal of the project is to establish long-term community relationships that support bird safe practices and reduce bird fatalities due to light pollution, buildings, and window collisions. And what we do is we collect data on where, when, and who is colliding with windows so that we can approach property managers with targeted actions to prevent bird mortality and can help provide solutions. And so, what can we do with all of this data that we collect? One thing that we do with our data is we submit it to an organization called the Global Bird Collision Mapper. This is a website that anyone in the world can access, and you can look and see where people who are doing similar work to us have logged collisions with buildings. This people in the public can also register and then make submissions as well. Our data has also been used in larger national studies. One example is that National Audubon and KPMG, an analytics firm, have previously partnered to review our bird strike information as well as that of BirdSafe Philly up in Philadelphia. And they've used that to try to do some analytics and see what is causing these or what conditions makes a collision more likely. And then we also, our data is in our iNaturalist projects, which is available to researchers and the wider community for, citizen science on iNaturalist. And so in our past surveys in downtown St. Louis, those originally started in the fall of 2020 and they continue till today. We've surveyed each spring and fall during that period with the exception of fall 2022. In that time, we've logged 1,355 observations into our project. And that number does include some birds that were deemed to not be collisions. Uh, but by and large, most of those are collisions. There is a very, very small amount that might be deemed predatory, but that's from further back in the data set, and we haven't gone back to go through all of that. Of those observations, though, we've accounted for 89 species of bird, and you can see here the birds that we're encountering most frequently. We've got a fair amount of warblers, some sparrows, and some northern water thrush and a yellow-bellied sapsucker, which is a member of the woodpecker family. For downtown Clayton surveys, we actually started those in spring 2024, and we're continuing those. We continued those until now. Um, we've recorded 117 observations in that time, and that accounts for 36 different species of birds. And as you can see here, unfortunately, we have seen in 2024 a fair amount of hummingbirds that we've encountered. And then the overall 2024 monitoring results, we conducted 102 surveys last year between the spring and the fall seasons, and we documented 381 confirmed collisions. So that's after we went through all of the data and removed anything that was deemed to be a non-collision, whether that be perhaps being struck by a vehicle or um, some other form of mortality. And as you can see with that graphic here on the right, the majority of the collisions we're encountering are in downtown St. Louis, almost three-quarters of them. And then about a quarter of them, a little more, are occurring in downtown Clayton. And I went ahead and completed a full report of our findings from 2024. That's available on our website, stlouisaudubon.org. I'd encourage anybody who's interested in learning more and getting some more in-depth detail about what we encountered to go ahead and read that. It's, I think, very informative and really goes to show what we're seeing here in downtown St. Louis and in downtown Clayton. And just a little bit more of a look for those of you who are familiar with downtown Clayton. Here just details the different buildings that we're monitoring and what we're seeing. The place we're seeing the most collisions is at 1 North Brentwood, which is just to the north of Shaw Park. And then this is what we're encountering in downtown St. Louis in 2024. Um, Bank of America Plaza is where we're by and far seeing the most collisions. That building is actually just south of the city garden space that we started the presentation with that very reflective glass. And it seems to be a very problematic building for these birds between the being around the green space and then also with the materials. It's a very reflective building. All right. So now that we've gone over some of the background about birds and migration and what causes collisions and a little bit of our results, I'd like to talk about our Spring 2025 surveying protocol. So this year we are going to continue with surveys in downtown Clayton and downtown St. Louis. Um, for as far as the reasons that we started in Clayton, um, there's in downtown Clayton an increasing amount of buildings being built or refurbished with new facades, new glass, things of that nature. So there's a chance to talk with people as these developments are happening, and there's also a hope that there's more receptiveness to our recommendations. Since it's a smaller municipality, things are a little bit easier to change and actually have some changes implemented versus in places like downtown St. Louis or St. Louis City rather, where it could be a little more bureaucratic. As far as downtown St. Louis, we're continuing our monitoring efforts there because we know that it's a problem area that's experiencing a lot of collisions. And continuing our surveys there allows us to build our data set, which we can use for further analysis. Um, and it allows us to really show that, it's not just a blip in time. This is something that, season over season we're continuing to see. And when we have two different data sets that we're collecting, so for Clayton and downtown St. Louis, that is useful because then we can start drawing comparisons between the sites. So, for example, if we have a day where there's a lot of collisions in downtown St. Louis, we could also look at our data and see, well, was there also a corresponding uptick in collisions that we saw in Clayton? And so here in the image, you can see a map of our survey route here in Clayton. And so the blue buildings on the map indicate the buildings that we want to survey. And you'll notice that the buildings also have a kind of dark blue border around them. Those are indicating what sides of the buildings are accessible for us to survey. So here's a little zoomed in portion of the map that gives you a little bit of a better view of those dark blue borders showing where you're able to go and look for dead and stunned birds. Um, and then you would move on once you finish one building, you walk on to the next. So when a bird is found, um, we take photos of it from multiple angles. And the reason that we take photos from multiple angles is to aid in ID. We want to be able to see the different patterns and markings on the birds, and sometimes little differences between patterns and markings is how you can actually determine one species from another. So it's really important that we get a nice view of the different patterns and parts of the bird. That way we're able to ID it even after the fact when we're no longer out in the field with the bird. And so the shots that we take of the birds that we encounter are a top-down shot or dorsal, a bottom shot, which is ventral, a side view, a clear view of the head, and a context shot. And then once we have those pictures, we use those and start building our observation in iNaturalist. And so for a little more detail on the pictures here, here is some examples of context shots. And you can see in each of these pictures um, that there is a little cone. And we use these cones when we're taking our context shots so that the bird's location can easily be seen quickly within the shot. Some of the birds that we encounter are very small, so that cone helps us and whoever's looking at these pictures to very quickly pick out this is where the bird is located within the context of this photograph. And we will go ahead and provide you with one of the little cones. We'll arrange for that before you go out for your first survey, and that's provided by the program. All right, and here are examples of those other shots as well. So top left, we have the dorsal or the back. Bottom left, we have a side view. Middle, we have a view that's giving that more detailed shot of the head. Upper right, we have the ventral or the bottom shot. And then we have the context photo in the bottom right with the little cone. All right. And all of our observations are recorded in our iNaturalist projects. And iNaturalist is a crowdsourced species identification system and an organism occurrence recording tool. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it really is a great resource for a lot of different things. You can record observations that you make while you're out, hiking or birding, and add those to your iNaturalist account. That's good because it can keep a log of what you've seen over time. It can also help with getting identification on things that you aren't sure what they are. So if you ever have, a really cool bird or plant that you saw out in the field, you don't have to be able to positively identify that on the app, but others in the community can see your observation then, and if they know what it is, they can help you ID it. And it's also a great way to collaborate with others to collect information for a common purpose, like we're doing here with the BirdSafe St. Louis project. It's a great place for us to be able to have all of our data and observations in one place, easily accessible to our partners and our staff. And it's, like I mentioned, just the accessibility of the information, the fact that it can be exported for further analysis and making graphics, and the fact that we use less supplies and it's more eco-friendly um, are great reasons to use iNaturalist. In the past, when our project first started, each observation would actually have a little paper ticket that the finders would fill out in on site and take a picture of it with the bird. So we no longer do that. That's all been replaced by the convenience of this iNaturalist project. And so one thing that we'll need to do is if you'd like to participate, we'll need you to submit your iNaturalist information. That way we can add you to the project. You have to have permission and be added to our projects to add observations, and that's how we do that. Um, if you don't have an account already, you would just need to create one. And then you would also need to download the iNaturalist app to your phone. So that way, when you're out in the field, you're able to open the app and make your observations. So in that way, you do need a smartphone to record the observations in the field. But that doesn't mean that if you don't have a smartphone, you're not able to participate. In the event that you don't have a smartphone, just let us know in advance. That way we can make sure that you're being paired with someone who does have a smartphone and they can help take care of the logging the observations in the project for that walk. All right, so now let's talk about logging and observation in the iNaturalist projects. The downtown St. Louis and Clayton survey protocols are nearly identical, so the first steps of the process are going to be about the same, regardless of which site is surveyed. So the first thing you'll want to do is take your photos and being sure to get all those different shots that we want to get for each bird. Once you've done that, you'll want to open the iNaturalist app, and on the home screen, you'll want to click Add an Observation. And that on the Android app is a green circle with a plus sign. And in the following slides, the screen grabs are from an Android version of the app, but the Apple version is also very similar. So once you've clicked Add an Observation, it should pull up a screen like the one here on the right. And what you'll do at the top of the screen is you'll start by clicking this little camera button. And once you click that, it'll open up the camera roll and show the different photos there. So once you're in, you just will select the different photos that you would like to add to that observation. And that's indicated here by the little check mark, as those are the ones you've selected. Once that's done, you'll go just to the bottom of the screen and click Add. And so the next part down here is what did you see? So this is where you would add information about the species. So if you know what kind of bird you found, you can go ahead and type that in and select that as the species. If you're not sure, the best default is to just type in birds. And what that'll do is, like we were talking about earlier, um, if you're not exactly sure on the species, just flagging it as birds will put it on the radar of others, and then they can come in and help us identify what exactly we found. The next section down here is notes. And the notes, that's mainly for information, any information that you would like the project coordinators to know, any notes about, the bird, if it's alive or its condition. This is also beneficial for the incidental finds, which we'll get a bit later, or get into a little bit later here in the presentation. Next down is going to be the date and the time. That should be self-populated for you already. Next down will be location. Most times your phone's GPS is already going to pull that up automatically, but if it doesn't, you can click that location field and it'll pull up a Google map and you can zoom in and select right where you're at. If for some reason that area isn't auto-populating and you need help getting that set up, just let me know and I can help you with the settings on that, and we should be able to get you taken care of. Next field down is location visibility. We want to be sure that that's marked as open, and that's so that our data can be seen by others. Next field down is it captured or cultivated. That you'll always just leave unselected. That's the default. And then the next thing you'll want to click is here at the bottom, Add to Projects. And once you click that, it should take you to the screen here on the left. And so once you're here, you just select which project you're logging your observation at. Clayton or St. Louis. And this is an example for Clayton, so we'll go ahead and act like we clicked Clayton. And once you've selected that project, a series of questions will appear. And so the first one here you can see is building name. And so what you'll do is to figure out which building you're at, you can refer to those maps that we'll give you showing which buildings that we're surveying around. And then you'll just scroll down the list and select which one it is. Um, the list here in the dropdown is roughly east to west, so that should help you to find the building a little more quickly in the list, but it's a very short list, so you should be able to navigate it no problem. Um, in the event that the bird is found at a different building or around a different building that isn't on our map, you would select other, and then we will put notes about where that bird is found. So, side of the building, we'll go ahead and that's pretty simple. You just look and orient yourself north, south, east, west, and choose which one you need there. The next field is that incidental find. And so, in the event that it's not around one of our specific buildings that we're targeting, or it's between buildings, you would choose yes. Um, and then in that case, the best thing is to just put in the notes um, where exactly that bird was found. The next field down is distance from likely strike point. And so we use that to assess how where the collision occurred and how far away the bird ended up from the building. And we record that in feet and inches. If possible, don't use the apostrophe and quotation marks to indicate feet and inches. For some reason, when we pull the data from iNaturalist, it doesn't convert nicely and it's a little messy. If you do it, not a huge issue. We can get in there and figure it out. But it's easier if you just maybe put 6F. What I do typically is 6FT and then space and then however many inches IN. All right. And so possible predation. So this is also a yes or no question. And this is used so that if you're in doubt that like we don't want to count birds in our collisions if in our collision count if they didn't pass due to a collision. So if, you find a bird that has been predated upon, you would not want to include that. So what you would do is choose yes. Signs that a bird might have been preyed upon are that it's missing its head, you just find a wing, it's partially consumed. In the event that it's an obvious predation event, you don't need to log the bird in the project. But if you're unsure and there's any question, go ahead and log it and choose yes as an option there. And what that'll do is that'll flag it so that it tells the coordinators, hey, we need to review this, the pictures and the circumstances of this observation to determine if it's in fact a collision or a predatory event. Okay. And so when all the questions are complete, you're going to go ahead and choose the check mark at the top of the screen here. And if you've forgotten any of the fields that are required in the project, the app will stop you and won't let you go to the next screen. So that's a good fail-safe as far as being sure that you've got all of the questions answered. And once you're done with that, to complete the observation, you just would select the green arrow here at the bottom of the screen. So once you click that check mark up here, it takes you back to that home screen and you can see all that information like our birds, photos, and then you can see under projects there's a 1 indicating that you've logged it in a project. And then yeah, you just click the green check mark here and that's all it takes. All right, and here's a map of our site in downtown St. Louis. Like we were talking about earlier, this is pretty much smack dab in the middle of downtown. So here's the old courthouse, Keener Plaza, and City Garden, Market Street running east to west here. And in the downtown St. Louis project, it's all the same questions as Clayton. It's just that there's two additional fields. One of them is carcass information, which you see here. And that's always going to be no. In the past, we had collected some specimens for taxidermy and partnering with local universities for educational purposes. We're no longer doing that at this time, so that field should default as no, and it will always be no. The next additional field is section of building. And that helps us to narrow down exactly where a collision occurred. It's a secondary map that will provide you, and it shows a breakdown of some of the larger buildings that have that receive a fair number of collisions. And so the idea behind this is that in the event that we approach a property manager or a building owner that says they're interested in treating their building, but they can only do a certain portion of it at a time, we can use that section map information and help them decide where the most effective spot for treatments is. We could say, it's fantastic that that you're going to treat some of your windows. You should focus on this section of windows because this is where we see the highest mortality. And here's an example of one of those building section maps in downtown St. Louis. So this is the Spire building. And so you would just use this. So say, for example, you found a bird that was on this section of the building. What you would do is in that little section field in the downtown St. Louis project, you would just put in Spire -UW -1. And the same with all of the different spots, you just enter in that corresponding code. Um, if that is not a mandatory field, so in the event that the building does not have a section map, it won't require you to fill that out. All right. So now that we've gone over the project a little more and doing the observations in iNaturalist, let's go over some frequently asked questions. So one question is, how long does a survey take? And the best answer to that is it varies. The average time is probably around an hour and a half, but there's certain factors that might either make the walk shorter or longer. If you're not finding any collisions, it's not going to take as long. If you're finding a lot of collisions, it'll take longer. Another factor is, how fast do you walk? Those who walk a little faster naturally are going to finish a little bit more quickly. Another question we get a lot is what do we do with the birds? In the event that once we've taken all those pictures and logged the bird into our project, we do go ahead and dispose of the carcass in a trash can. And luckily, there are plenty of trash cans around in downtown St. Louis and Clayton, so you're never too far from one. And we go ahead and dispose of the carcass for multiple reasons. One is that it prevents the bird from being counted again on another survey. So that way, the next person down the line doesn't also find the bird, think it's a new individual, and log it as well. We don't want to double count our in our data. And then it's also it's more sanitary. A lot of times with these birds, laying out on the sidewalk, it can attract pests and insects and rats, other things that we don't really want to have around the city as much as possible. Um, Another question that comes up is, do you wear gloves? That is a personal choice. I wear gloves personally while I survey. There are some who don't. I would say that if you don't wear gloves, I would definitely recommend using hand sanitizer after handling the birds, and then just follow, good wildlife handling protocol. You don't want to be touching your eyes and your mouth when you're done, or anything like that. Um, when you're done with your surveys, you want to be sure to wash your hands really well, and just follow good sanitary protocol. And then paper forms, like I mentioned, in the past, we have used paper forms to help log information, but now that everything is in our iNaturalist projects, we don't need to do that. So everything gets logged right in the field and no waste. All right. For the maps, we will send you files of all the maps, the downtown St. Louis map, the Clayton map, and then also those section maps for the buildings in downtown St. Louis. Um, I recommend printing those out in case you aren't getting a great signal. It's always nice to have a backup. Um, in the event, or pardon me, you can also actually then take those maps and save them to your phone. That's another way that you can potentially avoid any sort of, service outage and just pull up the map on your phone. All right, so injured and stunned birds. There is a chance that you might encounter a bird that's stunned and still alive while you're out surveying. If the bird is somewhere that it is in immediate danger, you can locate it somewhere safer, like a shrub or somewhere that has a little bit better cover. Um, and then you can, go ahead if you'd like at the end of your walk, go back and check in on them and see if they've, regained their bearings and were able to keep flying on or, get out of that area. Um, if there's a visible injuries and you can tell that the bird's clearly hurt and needs help, you can contact one of our local rehabbers who can try to assist with the situation. So, in our instances, most times we are finding injured songbirds. Um, in that case, those birds go to wild bird rehab up in Overland. In the event that you find a raptor, like a hawk, an owl, a falcon, this has happened before. It's very rare. But in that case, you would want to contact World Bird Sanctuary for rehabilitation. In both cases, you don't just want to get the bird and show up on the doorstep. You should call either the respective facility and they'll ask you some questions to assess the situation. They might also have you send in some pictures just to, get a better visual situation of what's happening. And from there, they'll, tell you what to do. Um, in the event that you do take a bird into a rehab facility, please send me an email and let me go or let me know. That way I can try to keep some tabs on them and we can, see what exactly is going on. Unfortunately, a lot of times we don't see living birds. They're usually passed by the time we get to them. Um, but in the event that you do find one, the nice thing about living in this area is that there are places that can help. All right. And so as far as how the surveying schedule works, what we do is we'll go ahead and set up a sign-up calendar. So on the sign-up calendar, what you do is there's shifts for each date, and you fill in your name on the days that you'd like to survey. And you can sign up for multiple days, one day, however many you'd like. And all surveys will have two or more people on them. Two is the recommended amount. Any more, it can be a little bit, you might be a little, there might not be enough collisions for everybody to, have something to do. So we usually try to keep it at two, but if we need to have a larger group to help get new people trained, we can do that as well. Um, Ideally, everybody's first survey will be with someone who has done the protocol before at either site. And this just helps in case there's any issues out in the field or, troubleshooting or questions about, what do I put for this field? There's somebody there that can help. And it's also good to have an extra, set of eyes out there as well when you're, working with a partner. And so what you'll want to do then, once both slots are filled for a particular day, you'll want to coordinate with that person to see when and where you're going to meet and start the survey. Typically, we start our surveys early in the morning. In spring, it's going to be, around sometime between sunrise or dawn and sunrise. So around 6 to 6:30 is recommended. The reason that we survey so early is it's twofold. So we want to get out there and survey before building maintenance crews have a chance to clean up around the buildings. Unfortunately, some of these buildings realize that these collisions happen and that it's not sightly for the occupants of the building, so they have their grounds crews go out and sweep up the birds. Then there's also less chance of scavengers, interfering, like, rats or something and taking the carcass away. Um, as far as parking, a lot of times since we start early, you're not going to need to worry about it. Meters in downtown St. Louis and Clayton are free before 8 a.m. After that, there is a lot of metered parking around in downtown St. Louis. There's some metered parking available in Clayton as well. There's also a free parking lot near the library in Clayton, which is where I personally, when I survey Clayton, that's where I like to start at. All right, and so both surveyors, while you're out there, you can both post to iNaturalist, but we only want to have one observation recorded per bird. Like we said earlier, we don't want to double count, so that's how, so only one observation logged per bird. Um, we can also take photos of stun birds, um, and just what I would do is write in the notes that, they were stunned. We don't want you to go up and handle them and, put additional stress on them if they're not feeling well, and, we're gonna let them try to sit there and kind of regain their bearings. Um, there's a good chance that while you're out doing your collision monitoring, that someone might come up to you and say, "Hey, what are you doing? What's going on?" I always just say, be friendly, and it's a great chance for us to educate people about, what we're doing and why. So we can have name tags that I can make for you. If you want one of those, we'll get that information later on once we start collecting information like your iNaturalist name. But usually I just say something like, my name's Matt. I'm a volunteer with St. Louis Audubon Society, and we're out here, doing collision monitoring and documenting bird collisions with buildings. And usually that'll, raise other questions. People get more curious, like, well, how many do you see? Or they want to tell you about a bird that hit their window last year. It's usually a great time where people are really receptive, and you can really, spread the knowledge about what's going on and, why this is a problem. Um, in the event that you're ever at a property and you're asked to leave by, like, building security, that doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. If you do, usually if you just take the bird with you, they're fine with that. If you're ever though in a situation where you're feeling unsafe or ever in doubt, just go ahead and leave, and please let me know what building the issue occurred at. Like I said, this is very rare, but I want to, make sure that everyone's safe out there, and that's really our utmost priority. So is your safety. So, if in doubt, go ahead and just go about your way, and it won't be the end of the world if we miss logging a collision. It's all right. And then survey all buildings. So we want to be sure to survey all of the different buildings that are specified on the route. Some days you're only going to find a few birds, and other days you'll find more. So, like we mentioned earlier, time will vary. Um, in the event that you need to get to work, or and you need to leave early, if you want to just like let me know, I can try to get out there and finish the buildings that you weren't able to make it to. Um, and or if you're out and it's, the weather gets bad and you can't complete the survey, that's okay too. Safety is the key here, so just let me know what you were able to get done, and we'll take it from there. In the event that you find no collisions on your walk, please email me to let me know that. In this case, no evidence of collision is evidence itself. So we want to be sure to record when we're not finding birds. because that's also a part of our data set. All right, and finally, here's just a few other considerations for the season. So bat data for MDC. So MDC is also using iNaturalist like we are, but they're using it to track bat sightings around the state. And so their goal is that they want to document what species are being encountered and get a better understanding of the bat distribution throughout the state. So their project is Bats of Missouri. And what they've asked is if we're out there doing our bird surveys and we come across any bats, they just ask that we take a picture or two and submit those as a general iNaturalist observation. The team at MDC is going to be able to see, where the observation was logged, which would be Missouri, and then they can review that and add it to their project. So it's really as simple as taking a couple pictures, adding an observation, and you're done. In my personal experience, I've encountered more bats during my fall surveys, especially on mornings where there's been like, a big dip from the daytime temperature into, a pretty substantial low. You'll see a lot of kind of groggy bats hanging on the buildings around some of the the route on downtown. And as far as safety is concerned, please do not handle bats. Bats can carry rabies and be vectors for other illness. So unless you have experience with bats and are vaccinated against rabies, please do not handle the bats. And if you're not comfortable with logging the bats, that's okay. It's completely voluntary. Um, but I know that our partners at MDC would definitely appreciate that data while we're already out there. So if you're so inclined, please give that a consideration. All right, and highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI. I'm sure that all of you have heard about that by now, and the concerns around it. So at this point, it's primarily affecting waterfowl and scavengers. So waterfowl behavior like roosting together in large numbers, that naturally helps to allow for the spread of disease. There's also, been some finding that it spreads through fecal matter and it spreads well in water. So again, when we're thinking about ducks and waterfowl, it's a natural vector. And in St. Louis, there have been some recent cases. You probably might have seen on the news about the wood duck that was found on the grounds of the St. Louis Zoo on one of their ponds. Um, so they now are following special protocols, such as the flight cage is closed, and they're actually closing the penguin house early daily for cleaning. Um, but there's been no known cases of HPAI so far in the songbird populations, and at the moment, it's not a concern. Um, just please, if you're concerned about something, a bird that, there could be an issue, use your best judgment. If you don't feel safe, handling it, that's okay. Just take some pictures. Um, and then, it just always helps to follow best practices when handling wild animals, including wearing gloves, using hand sanitizer, being sure that you're washing your hands thoroughly when you're finished, and then, just not touching your face, your eyes, your mouth, and or around your face. Um, in the event that you encounter a dead raptor or waterfowl this season while surveying, please don't handle that and go ahead and report it to me. You can shoot me a text or an email, either is fine. Um, but we'll probably want to go ahead and get that reported then to MDC. Um, and we don't want you to handle them for those reasons that we talked about earlier, that, so far a lot of cases have been found in them. I'm also staying up to MDC about, possible cases and if there's any sort of, change in advice or how we should proceed with our work, I'll be sure to let everybody in the group know ASAP. All right, so what's next? What we'll do from here is I'll be sending out a Google form and requesting some information from you. One thing will be your iNaturalist account, so that way we can add you to our projects. I'll also ask for a phone number in case I don't have it already. That way we can put you on the phone tree as far as being able, the phone tree that we use to contact one another whenever we're signed up with someone on the calendar. Um, I'll also include the maps for the different sites and the slides and this recording of the presentation. The sign up calendar will also be going out, and the survey period this season is going to be from around April 13th to the end of May. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in today. And in the event that you have any questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. You have my contact information here. Again, I'm happy to help with any questions that you might have. In the event that you're ready to get involved and you're looking for a survey partner ever, I'm always happy to join you, and as long as I'm not already out on a survey myself. But yeah, I'm really excited to have you all on board this season, and I thank you all for your time and appreciate you listening to this presentation, and I hope to see you this season. Thank you.